Warning, listening to Unleash Your Genius can be good for your health.
Symptoms may include looking and feeling better,
More energy, healthier kids, and increased productivity.
Unleash Your Genius podcast brings you the science, art, and philosophy of health, wellness,
Epigenetics, and lifestyle.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Thank you for joining us here on Unleash Your Genius. I'm your host, Dr. Brian Peterson, and my guest today, I've got a really special guest for you today, Dr. Don Clum. He's one of these guys who's got a bio about 5 pages long, and it would take me forever to cover all of the stuff that he's done. But I want to give you some of the highlights. And to be honest with you, this is my second attempt at doing an intro, as you'll hear when after I introduce Dr. Don, that reading his bio, I went on and on. So let me give you some of the highlights before I introduce you to him. Look, Dr. Don graduated from Life University in Marietta, Georgia in 1997 with a degree in human nutrition. And then in 2000, he received his doctorate in chiropractic. After he graduated, he moved over to San Jose, Costa Rica, where he was invited to work with the Costa Rican Olympic Committee and athletes. And he was a pretty big deal in Costa Rica, and he's a pretty big deal in America as well. But he was a frequent guest on national television and radio over there, and he was influential in bringing holistic healthcare to people of Central America. And he worked with government programs, instituting WHO procedures, and working directly with indigenous populations of Costa Rica. And he's a regular speaker for professional sports teams, universities, medical groups, chiropractic schools, businesses, government agencies. Dr. Clum was instrumental in forming legislation recognizing chiropractic in Costa Rica as well. Then Dr. Clum moved back to the States. And what we're going to talk about today is his programs that he's designed for, not specifically for weight loss, but for reversing and preventing type 2 diabetes and metabolic disease. And he works with people that are weight loss resistant, obesity, and people with cardio-metabolic issues. And he's designed national corporate wellness programs. And now he works with a company called ADURO, who delivers alternative diabetes prevention programs. And these programs rival and beats the national statistics of the National Diabetes Prevention Program from the N.I.H. and the C.D.C. And he's also started a PhD program in 2015, which he's currently working through. I think that pretty much does it. And here is, just want to introduce Dr. Clum, Dr. Don Clum. Welcome to the Unleash Your Genius podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Great to be here. Thank you so much for the invite.
Yeah.
Great and fun time. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hey, look, I know I just introduced you, but can you tell us a little bit more about you? What did I miss? Who are you personally? And, what do you like to do for fun?
Yeah, I know those intros and those bios can be quite dry and boring. And so, who I am, I'm your friendly neighborhood chiropractor, just a mild-mannered nutritionist. And basically what I do is I do a bunch of research and I try all these things out. And I'm always making up these new programs like you introduced me with, basically to improve my own health and the health of my family. Then when I get some things right, I like to share it with people wherever I can, and we pass it on to patients and also into the population health. And so basically it's like, I run this one big giant personal research center we call Life and My Family. And, and then the passion that I have basically is communicating that, getting it out to the masses and seeing people change. And of course, on the personal side, I got my family, I got my friends. I like to do some of that as well.
Nice. Yeah, I've been following you on Facebook recently, and you really provide a lot of thorough information. It's a valuable resource just following you.
Well, I appreciate that, and that's one way that I get an opportunity to instill the things that I learned a little bit deeper into myself and how I can understand it better, to communicate them to others. If I can't communicate what I'm learning or what I think I know to somebody else very easily to the point where they know it and they can communicate it, then I don't really know it that well myself, and I second guess myself. And so part of that is to share the information, but part of it is it's therapeutic to know that I know what I think I know.
Nice. Yeah. Hey, let's talk about weight loss, Don. Do you have some simple tricks and tips? Because that's what everybody wants to know, how to lose weight. But more scientifically, is there some overarching rules that people can live by, or is it, more of an individualized thing?
Well, there's actually both. But first, I want to start off by saying weight loss in and of itself is absolutely pointless. Other than our cosmetic ego value that we put on it ourselves, there is no health reason to just generically lose weight. Now, I know a lot of people do it for health, and a lot of places recommend it to improve certain risk factors and so forth, but there's a reason for that. Just generic weight loss, trying to lose weight, is not correlated with health. Different kinds of fat on our body, whether it's visceral fat, whether it's organ fat, whether it's adipose fat, white fat, brown fat, all correlate to different functions in our body. Our metabolic functions, our cardiovascular functions, our cognitive functions, our inflammatory and immune functions. And then when you look at it through the scope of health, or how your body functions and what you want to target to either lose or to improve weight-wise, then it makes a whole lot of sense. Then there's a lot of reasons to go after this thing. And when you do it from a side of health, depending on your profile, who you are and why you're doing this, then there are exactly, like you said, many, many different ways to approach it, different for potentially every single person. But then again, there still are some fundamentals that are true across the board.
Right. So let's say there's just if there was one thing about the topic of weight loss that you just wish everybody knew, what would that be?
The one thing I wish everybody knew, or it's actually one thing I wish everybody didn't know or think they know, is that calories matter, because they don't. Calories are one of the biggest misunderstood, screwed up, invented guess of a measurement that I've ever seen, and it's done more to damage our health and our weight than anything else. So if there was one thing, I'd tell people, forget about calories, quit counting them, don't try to increase them to gain weight, don't try to decrease them to lose weight, because the body doesn't work that way. Calories do not drive our metabolism, hormones do.
So what controls those hormones?
That's the logical next question. And when we're talking about weight, there's only one hormone that safeguards, that guards, that controls and determines our body fat. Only one, but there's at least 8, if not more, hormones that activate fat burning, that will take the fat off of our body, out of our organs, out of our viscera, out of our belly, and so forth. But only this one hormone that puts it on our body and keeps it on our body when we want to lose weight will trump all the other 8. And that hormone is insulin. And so if there is a theme, if there is something to count where people count calories, and I'd say don't do that, if you're going to count something, count how many hormones and which ones you activate throughout the day. Mainly, the focus is on insulin. Try to not stimulate insulin as much as you can, and then you'll start to see the potential and possibility to lose or change your weight.
Right. So for a lot of our listeners, we're transitioning from like the standard Australian diet or the standard American diet. What are some simple, quick, well, not really simple or quick, but what are some things that you would look out for to reduce the insulin levels?
Yeah, and they can be simple and quick. That's just because they're simple and quick doesn't mean they're ineffective. It doesn't mean they're wrong or unhealthy. The first thing that we tell people to do, before we even touch on the subject of what people are eating, we want to change when they're eating. The first thing I tell people is stop snacking. Just eat 3 meals a day. Eat as much as you want in those meals. It could be as simple as breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but stick to 3 times you eat a day and no snacking in between, before or after. That's step number 1.
No snacking. I know I'm not going to have a bag of chips, but what about like some macadamia nuts or a carrot stick? Yeah,
Dr. Peterson, you're exactly right. That's what everyone asks. That's you're following the script, I think. So that's the exact question. They say, all right, what about my apple? What about my peanut butter? What about my nuts? What about this and that? No, don't eat anything. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't care what you eat then. I don't care how much you eat then. Eat till you're full. Don't overstuff, but eat till you're full. Eat till you're satisfied, and just don't allow space between breakfast and lunch and dinner, then of course dinner overnight into your breakfast. 3 meals a day, no snacking, even things that you think are healthy like nuts, like almonds, like macadamia nuts, like the apples, like the peanut butter, like we mentioned, or carrot sticks. Just don't do it, not because they're unhealthy, right? They're not unhealthy, but they will stimulate insulin. And every time you eat, there's some level, just about every time, there's some level of insulin that's stimulated, and that's what we're trying to avoid. We need to stimulate insulin less often and in lesser amounts. And that's step number one, to allow those insulin levels to come down in between meals by not snacking.
Okay. So insulin is released even when I eat a steak, right, with the protein. The only thing that doesn't release insulin is fat. Is that correct?
Correct. Insulin is stimulated by almost every food. The only food that has a negligible, little to no insulin secretion potential is pure fat. Okay? Pure natural fat doesn't stimulate insulin, but everything else does to a different degree. Carbohydrates are the highest stimulator of insulin. Things like sugars, like grains, they stimulate insulin the most. They're responsible for 23% of the secretion of insulin. Protein, or specifically the different amino acids that are in the protein, stimulate insulin as well. They're responsible for 10%, but just under half the amount of insulin-stimulating power is carbohydrates. So that's not negligible. That's something. And then the other 67% of the activation and stimulation of our insulin levels comes from different hormone exchanges, whether it's from stress, whether it's from what's called the incretin effect that happens from different foods we eat, like processed foods, or from chemicals or toxicity or so forth. That's where the other stuff comes into play.
Okay. So you talked about those 8 other hormones. Can you talk about those a little bit and how we can stimulate those fat-burning hormones?
Yeah. Now you want to test me a little bit, huh? That's what you're doing? All right. Well, let's see if I can get these right. First, the opposing hormone to insulin is glucagon. So glucagon, it's what helps burn fat. It also stimulates the liver to make and release blood sugars when we don't eat. So it's a good thing. So glucagon is number one. Testosterone would be another one. Cortisol would be another one. Adrenaline would be another one. Human growth hormone would be another one. Insulin-like growth factor would be another one. And then there's a couple more, so I'd have to think, and I don't have them in front of me, but you get the picture.
That's awesome. So that sounds like exercise to me. Is that right? Are those stimulated from exercise?
Yes, the entire point of exercise in a health program, in my opinion, has nothing to do with calories. Everyone's trying to find the high caloric burn workout or the afterburn, blah, blah, blah. That is negligible. That is pointless. Remember, it's not calories that put weight on. It's not calories that take it off. So therefore, trying to burn more calories in a workout there's no point to it. It will not make the impact that you think. The reason we exercise, and we exercise in different ways, because there's different forms of exercise, is to stimulate certain hormones. Remember, we're setting up a hormonal cascade throughout the day so that in the night, when the orchestra of all these hormones come out to play, repair, and do its job, we got the right thing going on, and we can build muscle, we can repair, we can detox, and we can burn fat. So exercise is all about it. That's why we recommend either high intensity, short bursts, peak training, weightlifting, anything like that, because it stimulates mainly human growth hormone, or at least it starts to trigger of it in the cascade. And every hormone has friends and it has foes. A foe of a hormone is another hormone that works opposite to it. So like insulin, for example, when it's up, it drives down human growth hormone. So if you're eating a bunch of carbs and junk and you're raising insulin, you're dropping your human growth hormone. That's your anti-aging. That's your youth. That's your strength hormone. On the other side is, as you're working to eat in a way that stimulates less insulin, and you work out in this certain way that we're talking about, you stimulate more human growth hormone, and that works inversely with insulin, helping to drive it down and keep it down. So they work inversely to each other that way. So the old adage is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And the enemy of insulin is human growth hormone. Therefore, I want to do everything I can to promote it, not only to keep insulin down, but also to keep me fit, muscular, tight skin, all that stuff.
Nice. Don, can you pause just for a second? I'll be right. Yeah,
Sure.
Big girl, what's up?
Do you know that sometimes when you have music, when there's music, your heart starts doing
Okay, I'll be with you soon. Remember, only come in if there's a fire.
Yeah, and when you do it, your heart's like donut, 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 and the music's like donut, donut, donut.
All right, I love you. Thank you. Sorry about that. All right.
Oh, that's awesome. I got 3 kids.
Can we talk about women and thyroid issues? I think a lot of people blame their thyroid for their lack of being able to lose weight. And have you done any research on that, or can you touch on that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Women blame the thyroid. Men blame the adrenals or cortisol. That's what we call the belly fat hormone. And so we both have our scapegoats, but neither one of them are responsible for the weight we gain when there's an issue there. Because remember, there's only one hormone that mediates fat accumulation, putting on fat, or allowing it to be burned. It won't, it'll hold on to fat and not let you burn it even when you do all the right things when insulin is out of whack. So it's not the thyroid or the thyroid hormone that makes you gain the weight. It's the relationship between the thyroid hormone and insulin. Every hormone has friends and foes. So I would call thyroid a friend of insulin hormone. It's a friendly hormone because when they're firing together, they synergize each other and they make the effects of each other worse. That's why insulin resistance is related to thyroid problems, and thyroid problems, it increases insulin resistance. The same is true with cortisol. Cortisol and insulin, they're like buddies on the playground. They're the bullies on the playground. When those two show up, man, they feed off each other and they bully all the other hormones. That's how that one hormone, insulin, could turn off 8 other hormones in a second because of how strong it is, because it piggybacks. And so it's a friend with cortisol, and it's the effect that cortisol has on insulin that helps contribute to the belly fat and the weight gain that we talk about with cortisol. So both of those, thyroid and cortisol, don't do it directly. It's through their relationship and the way they influence in the myriad of our life and lifestyle and everything else we're doing with insulin that causes any kind of weight issue. You have a poor diet. You're eating toxic foods. And an overdose of insulin is a toxicity issue. So you're eating carbohydrates, you're eating sugar, you're eating grains, you're eating processed foods, including processed proteins like protein powders and a lot of the quote-unquote health stuff that's out there stimulates insulin. So you got that going. Insulin by itself is a central nervous system stimulant. It revs it up, which causes inflammation, which then contributes to the cycle. And so then you get stressed and you release cortisol. Cortisol stimulates insulin because it makes your liver release more sugar into the blood, and so it's doing that. And it's also getting secreted because of that inflammatory response from the insulin, because it's initially anti-inflammatory. And cortisol by itself is also a central nervous system stimulator. So now you got 2 of those. Now you're ramping up the system. You're activating what's called the neurological tone. And you're taking it out of balance, which magnifies the effect of insulin, the inflammatory response, and so on. So this mom is going to feel more stressed out, be more stressed out, crave more junk food. Okay, she's going to have energy swings. She's going to have mental swings where she can't concentrate. She'll forget things. She'll have brain fog. And then when it comes time for bed, she won't be able to rev them down because of the inflammatory markers and the uprising of the sympathetic nervous system, and she won't be able to sleep. Sound like anyone you've heard of out there? I think that's about half of the population out there, but that's the cycle they feed into every single day. And in the center of it all is insulin. I call insulin the ultimate fundamental hormonal disruptor in the entire system.
All right, Dr. Clum, so what's your protocol? What's your first words of advice?
First, I tell her, smile, relax. You've come to the right place. We got a lot of options here for you. You're not doomed, because you get that feeling. It's part of the cycle. We start to hear things in our head that really aren't us. Like, I'm never going to turn this around. Like, I'm doing something wrong. Like, I'm a bad parent. blah, blah, blah. No, just relax. Smile, laugh, hug your kid, pet your dog, whatever it is. Because first and foremost, what that does is it stimulates oxytocin. And oxytocin is the great hormonal rebalance. Or oxytocin crushes cortisol. So in that moment, she'll take a breath and she'll calm down, and then we can start talking about what to do. First and foremost, I tell her, switch over to 3 meals a day. First week, that's all you got to do. Just don't snack. You know, if you don't eat breakfast, try to eat breakfast. If you don't eat breakfast and you can't get it in, don't worry. Then just have lunch and dinner. But have distinct meal times and stick to 2 to 3 meals a day, and do that for a week, and we'll start to see. What we have to do is we have to get a neutral ground. We have to get a baseline for this person before we can even do anything more advanced, because we don't know where her normal is, because she definitely hasn't been normal for a long time. And that's the first step, is how do we reestablish some kind of normality so we can really judge where we want to go with this.
I've seen a lot of my friends doing different challenges on Facebook, like weight loss challenges or weight loss percentage challenges. What are some things that our listeners should look out for to ensure that the program that they're doing is safe and actually healthy for them?
Well, first thing is you don't need to buy anyone's food. You don't need to buy any products. You don't have to have shakes, powders, elixirs, or mixes. That's number one. You can do it all with whole foods. You can do it all with regular old foods that you can buy in the produce department. And number two is don't do the multiple meals a day. A lot of people are getting into this fad gym concept of eating 3 meals a day plus 3 snacks plus a nighttime thing. So they're really eating 5, 7, 8 times a day, small meals, thinking they're revving their metabolism. And what they're really doing is they're shredding their entire hormonal system, because they're jacking insulin up with every time that they eat. And insulin doesn't come down as fast as blood sugar, so their blood sugar might even stay in an okay range, but their insulin's going off the charts. They're creating insulin resistance by doing that. Most people don't have to eat less. They're not overeating. They're eating too often. Most people don't have to eat less. They have to eat less often. That's number one. So by shifting over to those 3 meals a day, you'll start to bring that system down. Once you've got that under control, the next step we tell people is add some fat to every meal intentionally as an ingredient, not as something you just cook with, not as just butter in the pan or oil in the pan. Add it in there. Add some olives, add some olive oil, add some coconut oil, whatever you need. Add some extra butter on those veggies. But each meal, add some fat. That's step number 2.
What about coffee?
Well, coffee is very, very variable. Everyone responds differently. The only way to really know how you're going to respond or how coffee plays into your scenario is to test blood sugars or test ketone meters or breath meters, or somehow test, or even heart rate variability before and after, and get a baseline to test. Because for some people, coffee is no problem. It's absolutely neutral. For a good amount of people, coffee causes a problem. It causes a metabolic disruptance. It raises blood sugar and insulin, therefore adds to their issues. For other people, it does the opposite. It lowers blood sugars and pushes them more towards a ketogenic lifestyle or ketogenic state, which is good and helps them burn fat. The problem is you can't tell. There's no blood test. There's no way of looking at someone. You don't know what it's doing until you test it out, and that can be a little complicated. So if you're going to do a rule of thumb, I would say, okay, you can do coffee, but only once a day, and don't do it several times throughout the day either way, because it's not a good idea, because it's a stimulant, and you don't want to stimulate anything. You don't want to stimulate your immune system. You don't want to stimulate your metabolic rate, because that's all artificial. You want those things to raise and become strong naturally on their own, because you're doing the right thing, not because you're stimulating them, because that's an outside-in artificial state, and eventually will swing you the other way.
That's a big one. You know, you think, I got to increase this or stimulate that. And really it's just removing that idea and just letting the body run naturally.
Yeah, it's a very, very bad idea. They do it with metabolism all the time. I need to raise my metabolism. I need to stimulate my metabolism. I need to boost my metabolism. And that all of that is outside-in approach is bad, because what they're looking at is their resting metabolic rate, how much energy they're putting out at rest. And they don't realize that that's the effect. That's just the measurement. What determines your resting metabolic rate is your resting energy expenditure. Okay, and that becomes key, because when you look at metabolic rate, the highest metabolic rate output at any given time is from when you move around and you work out from your muscles. But when you're resting, they do nothing. your muscles do almost as little as fat does. They just sit around. And then the biggest energy burn of your entire life and system comes from your kidneys, from your heart, from your liver, and from your brain. So if you want to, they determine how much energy they need determines the resting metabolic rate. Okay, so if you really want to see your resting metabolic rate go up, you need to make your brain, your liver, your kidneys, and your heart more efficient. You do that, and your resting metabolic rate will shoot up. If you artificially stimulate that resting metabolic by boosting it, raising it, or what have you, then the rebound effect is it will lower the resting energy expenditure and push you the entire opposite way that you're trying to go. I know those were terms that can overlap and stuff. I hope that was clear. Think of your metabolic rate as a thermostat. It has a set point. It raises and lowers. When your thermostat is set at 70 degrees Fahrenheit and you light a fire in your stove and the room detects that it's getting hot in there, what does it do? It turns on the air conditioning. Why? Because your thermostat is set at 70 and it does it to bring it back to 70. Just like if you were in the same room and suddenly it started to snow and it got cold out, the room would detect that and turn on the heat to bring you back to 70 because that's what it's set at. So by stimulating or depressing artificially your metabolic rate, all you're doing is either lighting a fire or letting that snow in. But the bottom line is the body is going to go back to the point that it's set at. And by giving the body a reason to increase that set point by making your energy expenditure in those organs, the brain, the kidneys, the heart, and the liver, more efficient, then it will raise it. But it's not raising it, it's resetting it to a higher point. I know it could be considered an anal distinction, but it makes all the difference when we try to direct our actions.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thank you. And let's talk about your work at ADURO. And am I saying that right? ADURO?
ADURO, yes, sir. What ADURO is, it's a wellness company, and it borders on population health. Basically, it has a platform that we have a whole bunch of content and health programs in that we sell to large corporations who then enroll all their employees into it. And the idea is they do the health programs, their health gets better, they use their medical insurance less, and then they get bonuses and they get HSA money and they get they get incentives like that. That's the world that ADURO lives in. And what I do in there is I design health programs for that. And the program that we're specifically talking about is a pre-diabetes metabolic syndrome program for diabetes prevention. We're getting to people as we recognize that they're going down the path to type 2 diabetes, and we're turning them around before they get there.
Right. Okay. What do you guys look for in someone when you're looking to prevent diabetes? Is it insulin resistance, or are there other markers? Yes.
The driving force behind all chronic disease, but very linearly with type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular problems, metabolic syndrome and so forth, is insulin resistance. The same thing we're talking about here. To help the insulin sensitivity, help insulin be low and work better to lose weight and to gain muscle, is the same mechanism that will keep away type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular problems, and much more. It's the same fundamental issue. So how do you recognize that you may have insulin resistance? Well, there's a lot of different ways. One, if you have extra weight on your body, you can't get off. You've tried before and you've lost weight, but now you're doing the same thing and it won't come off. It's called weight loss resistance. That means you've gotten into an insulin-resistant state. If you have an increased waistline, over 35 inches for women or over 40 inches for men, that's a generous amount, then you're insulin resistant. That's in the waistline. If you have noticed that you get weird reactions to carbohydrates, such as bloating, such as gas, such as tired right after you eat, then you're probably looking at insulin resistance. If you've noticed that you are hypersensitive to stress, you get irritable, you get hangry, and you get touchy when in times where you didn't used to, that's the piggyback effect between cortisol and insulin, and you probably have insulin resistance. The list goes on, but the bottom line is insulin resistance is so common and so prevalent. It is the number one health condition that is seen by every type of doctor in Australia, in the United States, whether they know it or not, because it's that prevalent. And it's also what causes non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. When someone says they have a fatty liver, they have insulin resistance first. And it's so prevalent and becoming such a big deal that it's expected to be the number one disease worldwide within 10 years.
Wow.
Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Wow.
And its primary reason, insulin resistance.
Wow. And it's all preventable.
It's all preventable, and once it happens, it can be turned around. And even when it's gone down the road far and it's created damage in your liver or in your pancreas or in your kidneys or your thyroid or your adrenals, wherever it is, it can be improved significantly, if not reversed. Now, it can't always be reversed. Sometimes damage is done and you have to manage it, but a lot of it can be reversed. And here's the funny thing. It can all be reversed independent of weight loss, even though weight gain is a risk factor for it. Because if you look at it, globally, metabolic syndrome, which is part of this insulin resistance family, is definitely going on. If you have metabolic syndrome, you have insulin resistance. There are more people with metabolic syndrome and have a normal weight than there are people who have metabolic syndrome that are obese. So you can have this independent of weight, and you can reverse this independent of weight loss. And the other key factor is you can't lose weight until you get insulin resistance under control. You just can't do it.
Okay. So, Dr. Clum, if someone's listening right now and they're curious about getting a hold of you to find out more about how they can slow this down, where can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, I do short videos on all these topics. They're free. I put them up on Facebook. You can find my personal page and you can follow me, or you can find my professional page and you can like me. Both of them are named Don Clum. That wasn't intentional. It's a mistake I made a long time ago. But anyway, you can find it, Don Clum, DONCLUM. Both have pictures of me. One I'm speaking, one I'm with my gorgeous wife. And so you can find me there. Or you can go to my website, which is yourwellnesstribe.com, yourwellnesstribe.com. That's me, and you can find us there too.
I will have all the links to all of your stuff on our show notes at unleashyourgenius.com as well. So the Unleash Your Genius podcast is about breaking the chains that have been placed on our health, due to our modern lifestyle, which has completely removed us as humans from our natural healthy environment and pretty much caged us or removed us from eating and moving and thinking like a wild, healthy human should. But, removing ourselves or breaking free from those chains can be difficult. Is there a time that you struggled in changing your lifestyle at all?
Oh, yeah. Let me go back to where I started with this. People hear these things and they haven't thought about it like this before. They go, oh, wow, that's interesting. That's new. He knows this stuff, blah, blah, blah. Here's the bottom line. I'm in this for me. I study this. I live this because I've had challenges, and we all live in a world that's got the cards stacked against us health-wise, and I don't want to be sick. And I don't want my kids to be sick. I don't want them to fall into these traps. I don't want them to go down the road that I've gone down in the past. I was diagnosed twice with skin cancer. Twice. And I lived this. My parents, my dad's a chiropractor, my uncle, my aunt, my cousin, my sister, my wife, everybody. Right? And I got diagnosed twice, and I handled it both times twice. Never even got a biopsy. So I don't know what it was, but I resolved it naturally. And gone twice, hasn't been back. I've also had metabolic syndrome twice. Wow. I've also been borderline obese twice. And it always happens in the transition times in our life. When I moved, I've lived in 3 countries now. I've traveled to 40. When I move country to country, it throws you off. I have to do this, and I bring my family. I got to get them in school. I got to do this, and things get out of whack. I gain some weight. My system goes out. I'm very insulin reactive. Genetically, susceptibility, I don't know. I just am, and I know if I'm not on my game, that's the road I go down. So I learned this, and I want to master this for me and my family, and as I get a hold of a concept that I see helping me, I bring it to the patients, and then from the patients, I bring it to the population, and then to the public. And because here's the deal. Here's a really, really important concept, Dr. Peterson. The number one determinant of the outcomes of your medical care in your community is not the technology you have in your hospital. It's not the education or number of doctors that you have. It's not the access to care or the emergency procedures. It ends up being the overall health literacy, not of the medical people in your community, but of the other people, of the general populace in your community. That is a very strange statistic. So by educating myself and sharing with others, hopefully they educate themselves. We're lifting the tide, and everyone will have better outcomes because of it. So I'm doing it for me, my family, and for everybody else.
Brilliant. Do you have any last thoughts or any last words of advice?
Yeah, just don't overcomplicate these things. And when you're looking to do something new and you're looking to work with somebody, you know, the ultimate litmus test is to ask yourself, does it make sense? If whatever someone's saying to you doesn't make sense or doesn't fit with you, I don't care if it's a medical doctor, PhD, the president of the United States, I don't care who it is. If it doesn't make sense to you, there's a reason, don't do it. Okay? So just these things should make sense. They should be pretty basic. They should be kind of aha. They should almost feel like, I kind of knew that. And just because they're simple, don't overlook them. Still give them a try. And got to have a plan, got to have a team, got to have a tribe. That's our whole motto.
Awesome, man. It's been fantastic having you on the show today. Thank you, Dr. Clum.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson, for having me. I hope you and your family are fantastic. Keep serving your people, and thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much for listening to Unleash Your Genius with your host, Dr. Brian Peterson. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit unleashyourgenius.com. We'll catch you next time.